At work. Immigrants often had a hard time making a living when they arrived in America. As newcomers, lacking education and skills, they had to compete with each other for the lowest paying jobs. A man could work 12 or 14 hours a day and still not earn enough to support his family. Everyone had to help out. Working children were common everywhere. Kids 8 or 10 years old worked in factories, warehouses, laundries, and stores. They ran errands, delivered packages, hauled coal and firewood, sold newspapers, shined shoes. Almost everyone over 14 was employed full-time. Youngsters under 14 were supposed to be in school, but the law was not strictly enforced. In 1890, an investigation by the Working Women's Society of New York found that a majority of sales girls and cashiers in retail stores were underage. The girls are sent to the store before they have fairly entered their teens because the money they earn there is needed for the support of the family. To keep their places, they are told to lie about their age and say they are over 14. The Women's Investigating Committee found the majority of the children employed in the stores to be underage, but heard only a single instance of the truant officers calling. In that case, they came once a year and sent the youngest children home. But in a month's time, they were all back in their places and were not again disturbed. When it comes to factories, where hard physical labor is added to the long hours, stifling rooms, and starvation wages, matters are even worse. In factories, the legal workday was 10 hours a day, 6 days a week. Children under 16 could not be employed unless they could read and write English. Children under 14 could not legally be employed at all. But in factories as well as retail stores, the law was often ignored. Pauline Newman was an immigrant child who worked in a New York City clothing factory. It was child's work since we were all children. We had a corner in the factory which was like a kindergarten. The work wasn't difficult. The shirtwaist finished by the sewing machine operator would come to us so we could cut off the thread left by the needle of the machine. You had little scissors because you were children. Somehow the employer knew when the inspector was coming. Materials came in high wooden cases, and when the inspector came, we were put into them and covered with shirtwaists. By the time he arrived, there were no children. In the busy season, we worked 7 days a week. That's why the sign went up on the freight elevator. If you don't come in on Sunday, don't come in on Monday. Many immigrants worked at home. Tenement apartments became busy workshops where entire families labored 7 days a week sewing clothing, making artificial flowers, rolling cigars, shelling nuts for restaurants, and performing other low-paying tasks. Children worked alongside their parents from the time they were old enough to follow directions. Sometimes extra workers were hired and the apartment became a small factory called a sweatshop because of the long hours, hard work, and low pay. It was not unusual to find a dozen or more people, men, women, and children, at work in a stuffy tenement room. The journalist, Jacob Riis, described a sweatshop district on the Lower East Side. Men stagger along the sidewalk groaning under heavy burdens of unsewn garments or enormous black bags stuffed full of finished coats and trousers. Let us follow one to his home and see how Sunday passes in a Ludlow Street of tenement. Up 2 flights of dark stairs, 3, 4, with new smells of cabbage, of onions, of frying fish on every landing. To the door that opens to admit the bundle and the man. A sweatshop, this, in a small way. 5 men and a woman, 2 young girls, not 15, and a boy who says unasked that he is 15 and lies in saying it, are at the machine sewing knickerbockers. The floor is littered ankle-deep with half-sewn garments. In the alcove, on a couch of many dozens of pants, ready for the finisher, a bare-legged baby with a pinched face is asleep. A fence of piled-up clothing keeps him from rolling off on the floor. The faces, hands, and arms to the elbows of everyone in the room are black with the color of the cloth on which they are working. The boy and the woman alone look up at our entrance. The girls shoot glances, but at a warning look from the man with the bundle, they tread their machines more energetically than ever. Enterprising children often went into business for themselves. Kids peddled matches, shoelaces, and ribbons from boxes set up on street corners. Young bootblacks carrying Homemade shoe shine kits waited for customers in railroad stations, parks, and busy intersections. Newsboys and an occasional newsgirl were familiar sights on city streets as they displayed the latest headlines and shouted, "Extra! Extra!" These newsies were independent business people. They paid cash for each armload of papers and took the loss for any papers they couldn't sell. They gathered at newspaper offices in the middle of the night, waiting for the early morning editions to roll off the press. In New York City, thousands of homeless working children, orphans, and runaways lived in lodging houses run by the Children's Aid Society. The society operated 5 lodging houses for boys and 1 for girls. At the huge Duane Street lodging house for newsboys, a resident paid 6 cents a night for a bunk in the dormitory, 6 cents for a breakfast of bread and coffee, and 6 cents for a supper of pork and beans, as much as he could eat. Boys were free to come and go as they pleased, but they had to obey the house rules. A notice over the front door read, "Boys who swear and chew tobacco cannot sleep here." School kids living at home often worked afternoons, evenings, and weekends. Leonard Cavello was 12 years old when he took a job delivering bread early in the morning, before school started. I ran home to tell my mother and father that I had found a job and was ready to do my share in supporting the family. My mother put her hand on my shoulder. My father said, "Good, you are becoming a man now. You have grown up." I was 12, but I could feel that he was proud of me. At 4:30 every morning, I walked rapidly over to the bakery shop. There the day's orders were waiting for me to put into bags for delivery. After a hurried cup of coffee and milk and a couple of rolls, I started out pulling a little wagon that I had constructed out of an old packing crate and baby carriage wheels. It was rush, 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 back and forth from the bakery until all the orders were delivered. Then I had to run home and get ready for school. For this work, I received $1.75 a week.